Spain. Spain, or the Kingdom of Spain, is a country located in southwestern Europe, with parts of its territory in the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea and Africa. It is the largest country in southern Europe and the fourth most populous European Union member state. Spanning across the majority of the Iberian Peninsula, its territory also includes the Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean, the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean Sea, and the autonomous cities of Ceuta and Melilla in Africa. Peninsular Spain is bordered to the north by France, Andorra, and the Bay of Biscay, to the east and south by the Mediterranean Sea and Gibraltar, and to the west by Portugal and the Atlantic Ocean. Spain's capital and largest city is Madrid, and other major urban areas include Barcelona, Valencia, Zaragoza, Seville, Malaga, Murcia, Palma de Mallorca, Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, and Bilbao. In early antiquity, the Iberian Peninsula was inhabited by Celtic and Iberian tribes, along with other local pre-Roman peoples. With the Roman conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, the province of Hispania was established. Following the Romanization and Christianization of Hispania, the fall of the Western Roman Empire ushered in the inward migration of tribes from Central Europe, including the Visigoths, who formed the Visigothic kingdom centered on Toledo. In the early 8th century, most of the peninsula was conquered by the Umayyad Caliphate, and during early Islamic rule, Al-Andalus became a dominant peninsular power centered in Córdoba. Several Christian kingdoms emerged in northern Iberia, chief among them Asturias, Leon, Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and Portugal, made an intermittent southward military expansion and repopulation, known as the Reconquista, repelling Islamic rule in Iberia, which culminated with the Christian seizure of the Nasrid Kingdom of Granada in 1492. The dynastic union of the Crown of Castile and the Crown of Aragon in 1479 under the Catholic monarchs is often considered the de facto unification of Spain as a nation-state. During the Age of Discovery, Spain pioneered the exploration of the New World, made the first circumnavigation of the globe and formed one of the largest empires in history. The Spanish Empire reached a global scale and spread across all continents, underpinning the rise of a global trading system fueled primarily by precious metals. The 18th century was marked by extensive reforms and, notably, the Bourbon reforms centralized mainland Spain. In the 19th century, after the Napoleonic occupation and the victorious Spanish War of Independence, the following political divisions between liberals and absolutists led to the breakaway of most of the American colonies. These political divisions finally converged in the 20th century with the Spanish Civil War, giving rise to the Francoist dictatorship that lasted until 1975. With the restoration of democracy and its entry into the European Union, the country experienced an economic boom that profoundly transformed it socially and politically. Since the Siglo de Oro, Spanish art, architecture, music, poetry, painting, literature, and cuisine have been influential worldwide, particularly in Western Europe and the Americas. Spain is one of the main nations of Latin Europe and a cultural superpower. As a reflection of its large cultural wealth, Spain is the world's second most visited country, has one of the world's largest numbers of World Heritage Sites, and it is the most popular destination for European students. Its cultural influence extends to over 600 million Hispanophones, making Spanish the world's second most spoken native language and the world's most widely spoken Romance language. Spain is a secular parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy, with King Felipe VI as head of state. It is a major advanced capitalist economy, with the world's 15th largest economy by nominal GDP, 4th of the European Union, and the 15th largest by PPP. Spain is a member of the United Nations, the European Union, the Eurozone, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, a permanent guest of the G20, and is part of many other international organizations such as the Council of Europe, CO, the Organization of Ibero-American States, OEI, the Union for the Mediterranean, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and the World Trade Organization, WTO. Etymology. The name of Spain, Hispania, comes from Hispania, the name used by the Romans for the Iberian Peninsula and its provinces during the Roman Empire. The etymological origin of the term Hispania is uncertain, although the Phoenicians referred to the region as Spania, meaning land of rabbits. Therefore, the most accepted theory is the Phoenician one. There have been a number of accounts and hypotheses about its origin. Jesus Luis Conchillos argued that the root of the term span is the Phoenician word spy, meaning to forge metals. Therefore, Hispania would mean the land where metals are forged. It may be a derivation of the Phoenician Hispania, meaning island of rabbits, land of rabbits or edge, a reference to Spain's location at the end of the Mediterranean. Roman coins struck in the region from the reign of Hadrian show a female figure with a rabbit at her feet, and Strabo called it the land of the rabbits. The word in question actually means hyrax, possibly due to the Phoenicians confusing the two animals. There is also the claim that Hispania derives from the Basque word espana, meaning edge or border, another reference to the fact that the Iberian Peninsula constitutes the southwest corner of the European continent. History. Prehistory and pre-Roman peoples. Archaeological research at Atapuerca indicates the Iberian Peninsula was populated by hominids 1.3 million years ago. Modern humans first arrived in Iberia from the north on foot about 35,000 years ago. The best-known artifacts of these prehistoric human settlements are the paintings in the Altamira cave of Cantabria in northern Iberia, which were created from 35,600 to 13,500 BCE by Cro-Magnon. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that the Iberian Peninsula acted as one of several major refugia from which northern Europe was repopulated following the end of the last ice age. The two largest groups inhabiting the Iberian Peninsula before the Roman conquest were the Iberians and the Celts. The Iberians inhabited the Mediterranean side of the peninsula. The Celts inhabited much of the interior and Atlantic sides of the peninsula. Basques occupied the western area of the Pyrenees mountain range and adjacent areas, Phoenician-influenced Tartessians flourished in the southwest, and Lusitanians and Vetones occupied areas in the central west. Several cities were founded along the coast by Phoenicians, and trading outposts and colonies were established by Greeks in the east. Eventually, Phoenician Carthaginians expanded inland towards the Meseta. However, due to the bellicose inland tribes, the Carthaginians settled on the coasts of the Iberian Peninsula, Roman Hispania and the Visigothic kingdom. During the Second Punic War, roughly between 210 and 205 BCE, the expanding Roman Republic captured Carthaginian trading colonies along the Mediterranean coast. Although it took the Romans nearly 2 centuries to complete the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, they retained control of it for over 6 centuries. Roman rule was bound together by law, language, and the Roman road. The cultures of the pre-Roman populations were gradually Romanized, Latinized, at different rates depending on what part of the peninsula they lived in, with local leaders being admitted into the Roman aristocratic class. Hispania served as a granary for the Roman market, and its harbors exported gold, wool, olive oil, and wine. Agricultural production increased with the introduction of irrigation projects, some of which remain in use. Emperors Hadrian, Trajan, Theodosius I, and the philosopher Seneca were born in Hispania. Christianity was introduced into Hispania in the 1st century CE, and it became popular in the cities in the 2nd century. Most of Spain's present languages and religions, as well as the basis of its laws, originate from this period. Starting in 170 CE, incursions of North African Maori in the province of Boeotia took place. The Germanic Swabian Vandals, together with the Sarmatian Alans, entered the peninsula after 409, weakening the Western Roman Empire's jurisdiction over Hispania. The Swabi established a kingdom in northwestern Iberia, whereas the Vandals established themselves in the south of the peninsula by 420 before crossing over to North Africa in 429. As the Western Empire disintegrated, the social and economic base became greatly simplified. The successor regimes maintained many of the institutions and laws of the late empire, including Christianity and assimilation into the evolving Roman culture. The Byzantines established an occidental province, Hispania, in the south, with the intention of reviving Roman rule throughout Iberia. Eventually, however, Hispania was reunited under Visigothic rule. Muslim era and Reconquista. From 711 to 718, as part of the expansion of the Umayyad Caliphate, which had conquered North Africa from the Byzantine Empire, nearly all of the Iberian Peninsula was conquered by Muslims from across the Strait of Gibraltar, resulting in the collapse of the Visigothic kingdom. Only a small area in the mountainous north of the peninsula stood out of the territory seized during the initial invasion. The kingdom of Asturias-Leon consolidated upon this territory. Other Christian kingdoms such as Navarre and Aragon in the mountainous north eventually surged upon the consolidation of counties of the Carolingian Marca Hispanica. For several centuries, the fluctuating frontier between the Muslim and Christian-controlled areas of the peninsula was along the Ebro and Douro valleys. Conversion to Islam proceeded at an increasing pace. The Muladies, Muslims of ethnic Iberian origin, are believed to have formed the majority of the population of Al-Andalus by the end of the 10th century. A series of Viking incursions raided the coasts of the Iberian Peninsula in the 9th and 10th centuries. The first recorded Viking raid on Iberia took place in 844, it ended in failure with many Vikings killed by the Galicians Burlistas, and 70 of the Vikings' longships captured on the beach and burned by the troops of King Ramiro I of Asturias. In the 11th century, the Caliphate of Córdoba collapsed, fracturing into a series of petty kingdoms, taifas, often subject to the payment of a form of protection money, pariahs, to the northern Christian kingdoms, which otherwise undertook a southward territorial expansion. The capture of the strategic city of Toledo in 1085 marked a significant shift in the balance of power in favor of the Christian kingdoms. The arrival from North Africa of the Islamic ruling sects of the Almoravids and the Almohads achieved temporary unity upon the Muslim-ruled territory, with a stricter, less tolerant application of Islam, and partially reversed some Christian territorial gains. The Kingdom of Leon was the strongest Christian kingdom for centuries. In 1188, the first form, restricted to the bishops, the magnates, and the elected citizens of each city, of modern parliamentary session in Europe was held in Leon, Cortes of Leon. The Kingdom of Castile, formed from a Leonese territory, was its successor as strongest kingdom. The kings and the nobility fought for power and influence in this period. The example of the Roman emperors influenced the political objective of the crown, while the nobles benefited from feudalism. Muslim strongholds in the Guadalquivir Valley such as Córdoba, 1236, and Seville, 1248, fell to Castile in the 13th century. The County of Barcelona and the Kingdom of Aragon entered in a dynastic union and gained territory and power in the Mediterranean. In 1229 Mallorca was conquered, so was Valencia in 1238. In the 13th and 14th centuries, the North African Marinids established some enclaves around the Strait of Gibraltar. Upon the conclusion of the Granada War, the Nasrid Sultanate of Granada, the remaining Muslim-ruled polity in the Iberian Peninsula after 1246, capitulated in 1492 to the military strength of the Catholic monarchs, and it was integrated from then on in the Crown of Castile. Spanish Empire. In 1469, the crowns of the Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon were united by the marriage of their monarchs, Isabella I and Ferdinand II, respectively. In 1492, Jews were forced to choose between conversion to Catholicism or expulsion. As many as 200,000 Jews were expelled from Castile and Aragon. The year 1492 also marked the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the New World, during a voyage funded by Isabella. Columbus's first voyage crossed the Atlantic and reached the Caribbean islands, beginning the European exploration and conquest of the Americas. The Treaty of Granada guaranteed religious tolerance towards Muslims, for a few years before Islam was outlawed in 1502 in Castile and 1527 in Aragon, leading the remaining Muslim population to become nominally Christian Moriscos. About 4 decades after the War of the Alpujarras, 1568 to 1571, over 300,000 Moriscos were expelled, settling primarily in North Africa. The unification of the crowns of Aragon and Castile by the marriage of their sovereigns laid the basis for modern Spain and the Spanish Empire, although each kingdom of Spain remained a separate country socially, politically, legally, and in currency and language. Habsburg Spain was one of the leading world powers throughout the 16th century and most of the 17th century, a position reinforced by trade and wealth from colonial possessions, and became the world's leading maritime power. It reached its apogee during the reigns of the first two Spanish Habsburgs, Charles V/I, 1516 to 1556, and Philip II, 1556 to 1598. This period saw the Italian Wars, the Schmalkaldic War, the Dutch Revolt, the War of the Portuguese Succession, clashes with the Ottomans, intervention in the French Wars of Religion and the Anglo-Spanish War. Through exploration and conquest or royal marriage alliances and inheritance, the Spanish Empire expanded across vast areas in the Americas, the Indo-Pacific, Africa as well as the European continent, including holdings in the Italian peninsula, the Low Countries and the Franche-Comté. The so-called Age of Discovery featured explorations by sea and by land, the opening up of new trade routes across oceans, conquests and the beginnings of European colonialism. Precious metals, spices, luxuries, and previously unknown plants brought to the metropole played a leading part in transforming the European understanding of the globe. The cultural efflorescence witnessed during this period is now referred to as the Spanish Golden Age. The expansion of the empire caused immense upheaval in the Americas as the collapse of societies and empires and new diseases from Europe devastated American indigenous populations. The rise of humanism, the Counter-Reformation and new geographical discoveries and conquests raised issues that were addressed by the intellectual movement now known as the School of Salamanca, which developed the first modern theories of what are now known as international law and human rights. Spain's 16th-century maritime supremacy was demonstrated by the victory over the Ottoman Empire at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571 and over Portugal at the Battle of Ponta Delgada in 1582, and then after the setback of the Spanish Armada in 1588, in a series of victories against England in the Anglo-Spanish War of 1585 to 1604. However, during the middle decades of the 17th century Spain's maritime power went into a long decline with mounting defeats against the Dutch Republic, Battle of the Downs, and then England in the Anglo-Spanish War of 1654 to 1660. By the 1660s it was struggling to defend its overseas possessions from pirates and privateers. The Protestant Reformation increased Spain's involvement in religiously charged wars, forcing ever-expanding military efforts across Europe and in the Mediterranean. By the middle decades of a war and plague-ridden 17th-century Europe, the Spanish Habsburgs had enmeshed the country in continent-wide religious political conflicts. These conflicts strained it of resources and undermined the economy generally. Spain managed to hold on to most of the scattered Habsburg Empire, and help the imperial forces of the Holy Roman Empire reverse a large part of the advances made by Protestant forces, but it was finally forced to recognize the separation of Portugal and the United Provinces, Dutch Republic, and eventually suffered some serious military reverses to France in the latter stages of the immensely destructive, Europe-wide 30 Years' War. In the latter half of the 17th century, Spain went into a gradual decline, during which it surrendered several small territories to France and England. However, it maintained and enlarged its vast overseas empire, which remained intact until the beginning of the 19th century. 18th century. The decline culminated in a controversy over succession to the throne which consumed the first years of the 18th century. The War of the Spanish Succession was a wide-ranging international conflict combined with a civil war, and was to cost the kingdom its European possessions and its position as a leading European power. During this war, a new dynasty originating in France, the Bourbons, was installed. The crowns of Castile and Aragon had been long united only by the monarchy and the common institution of the Inquisition's Holy Office. A number of reform policies, The so-called Bourbon reforms were pursued by the monarchy with the overarching goal of centralized authority and administrative uniformity. They included the abolishment of many of the old regional privileges and laws, as well as the customs barrier between the crowns of Aragon and Castile in 1717, followed by the introduction of new property taxes in the Aragonese kingdoms. The 18th century saw a gradual recovery and an increase in prosperity through much of the empire. The predominant economic policy was an interventionist one, and the state also pursued policies aiming towards infrastructure development as well as the abolition of internal customs and the reduction of export tariffs. Projects of agricultural colonization with new settlements took place in the south of mainland Spain. Enlightenment ideas began to gain ground among some of the kingdom's elite and monarchy. Liberalism and nation-state. In 1793, Spain went to war against the revolutionary new French Republic as a member of the First Coalition. The subsequent War of the Pyrenees polarized the country in a reaction against the Gallicized elites, and following defeat in the field, peace was made with France in 1795 at the Peace of Basel, in which Spain lost control over two-thirds of the island of Hispaniola. In 1807, a secret treaty between Napoleon and the unpopular Prime Minister led to a new declaration of war against Britain and Portugal. French troops entered the country to invade Portugal but instead occupied Spain's major fortresses. The Spanish king abdicated and a puppet kingdom satellite to the French Empire was installed with Joseph Bonaparte as king. The 2nd of May 1808 revolt was one of many uprisings across the country against the French occupation. These revolts marked the beginning of a devastating war of independence against the Napoleonic regime. Further military action by Spanish armies, guerrilla warfare and an Anglo-Portuguese allied army, combined with Napoleon's failure on the Russian front, led to the retreat of French imperial armies from the Iberian Peninsula in 1814, and the return of King Ferdinand VII. During the war, in 1810, a revolutionary body, the Cortes of Cadiz, was assembled to coordinate the effort against the Bonapartist regime and to prepare a constitution. It met as one body, and its members represented the entire Spanish Empire. In 1812, a constitution for universal representation under a constitutional monarchy was declared, but after the fall of the Bonapartist regime, the Spanish king dismissed the Cortes Generales, set on ruling as an absolute monarch. The French occupation of mainland Spain created an opportunity for overseas Criollo elites who resented the privilege towards peninsular elites and demanded retroversion of the sovereignty to the people. Starting in 1809, the American colonies began a series of revolutions and declared independence, leading to the Spanish-American Wars of Independence that put an end to the metropole's grip over the Spanish Main. Attempts to reassert control proved futile, with opposition not only in the colonies but also in the Iberian Peninsula, and army revolts followed. By the end of 1826, the only American colonies Spain held were Cuba and Puerto Rico. The Napoleonic War left Spain economically ruined, deeply divided and politically unstable. In the 1830s and 1840s, Carlism, a reactionary legitimist movement supportive of an alternative Bourbon branch, fought against the government forces supportive of Queen Isabella II's dynastic rights in the Carlist Wars. Government forces prevailed, but the conflict between progressives and moderates ended in a weak early constitutional period. The 1868 Glorious Revolution was followed by the 1868–1874 Progressive Sexenio Democrático, including the short-lived First Spanish Republic, which yielded to a stable monarchic period, the Restoration, 1875–1931. In the late 19th century, nationalist movements arose in the Philippines and Cuba. In 1895 and 1896 the Cuban War of Independence and the Philippine Revolution broke out, and eventually the United States became involved. The Spanish-American War was fought in the spring of 1898 and resulted in Spain losing the last of its once vast colonial empire outside of North Africa. El Desastre, the disaster, as the war became known in Spain, gave added impetus to the generation of '98. Although the period around the turn of the century was one of increasing prosperity, the 20th century brought little social peace. Spain played a minor part in the scramble for Africa. It remained neutral during World War I. The heavy losses suffered by the colonial troops in conflicts in northern Morocco against Riffian's forces brought discredit to the government and undermined the monarchy. Industrialization, the development of railways and incipient capitalism developed in several areas of the country, particularly in Barcelona, as well as labor movement and socialist and anarchist ideas. The 1888 Barcelona Universal Exposition and the 1870 Barcelona Labor Congress are good examples of this. In 1879, the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party was founded. A trade union linked to this party, Unión General de Trabajadores, was founded in 1888. In the anarcho-syndicalist trend of the labor movement in Spain, Confederación Nacional del Trabajo was founded in 1910 and Federación Anarquista Ibérica in 1927. Catalanism and Vasquism, alongside other nationalisms and regionalisms in Spain, arose in that period. The Basque Nationalist Party formed in 1895 and Regionalist League of Catalonia in 1901. Political corruption and repression weakened the democratic system of the constitutional monarchy of a two-parties system. The July 1909 tragic week events and repression exemplified the social instability of the time. The La Canadiense strike in 1919 led to the first law limiting the working day to 8 hours. After a period of Crown-supported dictatorship from 1923 to 1931, the first elections since 1923, largely understood as a plebiscite on monarchy, took place, the 12th of April 1931 municipal elections. These gave a resounding victory to the Republican Socialist candidacies in large cities and provincial capitals, with a majority of monarchist councillors in rural areas. The king left the country and the proclamation of the Republic on the 14th of April ensued, with the formation of a provisional government. A constitution for the country was passed in October 1931 following the June 1931 Constituent General election, and a series of cabinets presided by Manuel Azana supported by Republican parties and the so followed. In the election held in 1933 the right triumphed and in 1936, the left. During the Second Republic there was a great political and social upheaval, marked by a sharp radicalization of the left and the right. Instances of political violence during this period included the burning of churches, the 1932 failed coup d'état led by José Sanjurjo, the revolution of 1934 and numerous attacks against rival political leaders. On the other hand, it is also during the Second Republic when important reforms to modernize the country were initiated: a democratic constitution, agrarian reform, restructuring of the army, political decentralization and women's right to vote, civil war and Francoist dictatorship. The Spanish Civil War broke out in 1936, on 17 and the 18th of July, part of the military carried out a coup d'état that triumphed in only part of the country. The situation led to a civil war, in which the territory was divided into two zones, one under the authority of the Republican government, that counted on outside support from the Soviet Union and Mexico, and from international brigades, and the other controlled by the putschists, the nationalist or rebel faction, most critically supported by Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. The Republic was not supported by the Western powers due to the British-led policy of non-intervention. General Francisco Franco was sworn in as the supreme leader of the rebels on 1 October 1936. An uneasy relationship between the Republican government and the grassroots anarchists who had initiated a partial social revolution also ensued. The Civil War was viciously fought and there were many atrocities committed by all sides. The war claimed the lives of over 500,000 people and caused the flight of up to 500,000 citizens from the country. On 1 April 1939, 5 months before the beginning of World War II, the rebel side led by Franco emerged victorious, imposing a dictatorship over the whole country. Thousands were imprisoned after the civil war in Francoist concentration camps. The regime remained nominally neutral for much of the Second World War, although it was sympathetic to the Axis and provided the Nazi Wehrmacht with Spanish volunteers in the Eastern Front. The only legal party under Franco's dictatorship was the Falange Española traditionalist Huida las Jones, Fet Huida las Jones, formed in 1937 upon the merging of the fascist Falange Española de las Jones and the Carlist traditionalists, and to which the rest of right-wing groups supporting the rebels also added. The name of Movimiento Nacional, sometimes understood as a wider structure than the Fetway de las Jones proper, largely imposed over the latter's name in official documents along the 1950s. After the war, Spain was politically and economically isolated, and was kept out of the United Nations. This changed in 1955, during the Cold War period, when it became strategically important for the US to establish a military presence on the Iberian Peninsula as a counter to any possible move by the Soviet Union into the Mediterranean basin. U.S. Cold War strategic priorities included the dissemination of American educational ideas to foster modernization and expansion. In the 1960s, Spain registered an unprecedented rate of economic growth which was propelled by industrialization, a mass internal migration from rural areas to Madrid, Barcelona and the Basque Country, and the creation of a mass tourism industry. Franco's rule was also characterized by authoritarianism, promotion of a unitary national identity, national Catholicism, and discriminatory language policies. Restoration of democracy. In 1962, a group of politicians involved in the opposition to Franco's regime inside the country and in exile met in the Congress of the European Movement in Munich, where they made a resolution in favor of democracy. With Franco's death in November 1975, Juan Carlos succeeded to the position of King of Spain and head of state in accordance with the Francoist law. With the approval of the new Spanish Constitution of 1978 and the restoration of democracy, the state devolved much authority to the regions and created an internal organization based on autonomous communities. The Spanish 1977 amnesty law let people of Franco's regime continue inside institutions without consequences, even perpetrators of some crimes during transition to democracy, like the massacre of the 3rd of March 1976 in Vitoria or 1977 massacre of Atocha. In the Basque Country, moderate Basque nationalism coexisted with a radical nationalist movement led by the armed organization ETA until the latter's dissolution in May 2018. The group was formed in 1959 during Franco's rule but had continued to wage its violent campaign even after the restoration of democracy and the return of a large measure of regional autonomy. On the 23rd of February 1981, rebel elements among the security forces seized the Cortes in an attempt to impose a military-backed government. King Juan Carlos took personal command of the military and successfully ordered the coup plotters, via national television, to surrender. During the 1980s, the democratic restoration made possible a growing open society. New cultural movements based on freedom appeared, like La Movida Madrileña. In May 1982, Spain joined NATO, followed by a referendum after a strong social opposition. That year the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, PSOE, came to power, the first left-wing government in 43 years. In 1986 Spain joined the European Economic Community, which later became the European Union. The PSOE was replaced in government by the Partido Popular, PP, in 1996 after scandals around participation of the government of Felipe González in the dirty war against ETA. On the 1st of January 2002, Spain fully adopted the euro, and Spain experienced strong economic growth, well above the EU average during the early 2000s. However, well-publicized concerns issued by many economic commentators at the height of the boom warned that extraordinary property prices and a high foreign trade deficit were likely to lead to a painful economic collapse. In 2002, the Prestige oil spill occurred with big ecological consequences along Spain's Atlantic coastline. In 2003, José María Aznar supported U.S. President George W. Bush in the Iraq War, and a strong movement against war rose in Spanish society. In March 2004, a local Islamist terrorist group inspired by Al-Qaeda carried out the largest terrorist attack in Western European history when they killed 191 people and wounded more than 1,800 others by bombing commuter trains in Madrid. Though initial suspicions focused on the Basque terrorist group ETA, evidence of Islamist involvement soon emerged. Because of the proximity of the 2004 Spanish general election, the issue of responsibility quickly became a political controversy, with the main competing parties PP and PSOE exchanging accusations over the handling of the incident. The PSOE won the election, led by José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero. In the early 2000s, the proportion of Spain's foreign-born population increased rapidly during its economic boom but then declined due to the financial crisis. In 2005, the Spanish government legalized same-sex marriage, becoming the third country worldwide to do so. Decentralization was supported with much resistance of constitutional court and conservative opposition, so did gender politics like quotas or the law against gender violence. Government talks with ETA happened, and the group announced its permanent cease of violence in 2010. The bursting of the Spanish property bubble in 2008 led to the 2008-16 Spanish financial crisis. High levels of unemployment, cuts in government spending and corruption in royal family and People's Party served as a backdrop to the 2011-12 Spanish protests. Catalan independentism also rose. In 2011, Mariano Rajoy's Conservative People's Party won the election with 44.6% of votes. As Prime Minister, he implemented austerity measures for EU bailout, the EU Stability and Growth Pact. On 19 June 2014, the monarch, Juan Carlos, abdicated in favor of his son, who became Felipe VI. In October 2017 a Catalan independence referendum was held and the Catalan parliament voted to unilaterally declare independence from Spain to form a Catalan republic on the day the Spanish Senate was discussing approving direct rule over Catalonia as called for by the Spanish Prime Minister. On the same day the Senate granted the power to impose direct rule and Rajoy dissolved the Catalan parliament and called a new election. No country recognized Catalonia as a separate state. In June 2018, the Congress of Deputies passed a motion of no confidence against Rajoy and replaced him with the PSOE leader Pedro Sánchez. Since 2018, Spain has faced an institutional crisis surrounding the mandate of the General Council of the Judiciary, CGPJ. In January 2020, the COVID-19 virus was confirmed to have spread to Spain, causing life expectancy to drop by more than a year. In March 2021, Spain became the sixth nation in the world to make active euthanasia legal. Following the general election on 23 July 2023, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez once again formed a coalition government, this time with Summer, successors of Unidas Podemos. Geography. At 505,992 square kilometers, 195,365 square miles, Spain is the world's 52nd largest country and Europe's fourth largest country. It is some 47,000 square kilometers, 18,000 square miles, smaller than France. At 3,715 meters, 12,188 feet, Mount Teide, Tenerife, is the highest mountain peak in Spain and is the third largest volcano in the world from its base. Spain is a transcontinental country, having territory in both Europe and Africa. Spain lies between latitudes 27 degrees and 44 degrees north, and longitudes 19 degrees west and 5 degrees east. On the west, Spain is bordered by Portugal, on the south, it is bordered by Gibraltar and Morocco, through its exclaves in North Africa, Ceuta and Melilla, and the peninsula of Vélez de la Gomera. On the northeast, along the Pyrenees mountain range, it is bordered by France and Andorra. Along the Pyrenees in Girona, a small exclave town called Livia is surrounded by France. Extending to 1,214 kilometers, 754 miles, the Portugal-Spain border is the longest uninterrupted border within the European Union. Islands. Spain also includes the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean Sea, the Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean and a number of uninhabited islands on the Mediterranean side of the Strait of Gibraltar, known as plazas de soberanía, places of sovereignty, or territories under Spanish sovereignty, such as the Chafarinas Islands and Alhucemas. The peninsula of Vélez de la Gomera is also regarded as a plaza de soberanía. The Isle of Alborán, located in the Mediterranean between Spain and North Africa, is also administered by Spain, specifically by the municipality of Almería, Andalusia. The Little Pheasant Island in the River Bidasoa is a Spanish-French condominium. There are 11 major islands in Spain, all of them having their own governing bodies: Cabildos Insulares in the Canaries, Consells Insulars in Balears. These islands are specifically mentioned by the Spanish Constitution, when fixing its senatorial representation. Ibiza and Formentera are grouped, as they together form the Pitiusic Islands, part of the Balearic Archipelago. These islands include Tenerife, Gran Canaria, Lanzarote, Fuerteventura, La Palma, La Gomera and El Hierro in the Canarian Archipelago, and Mallorca, Ibiza, Menorca and Formentera in the Balearic Archipelago. Mountains and rivers. Mainland Spain is a rather mountainous landmass, dominated by high plateaus and mountain chains. After the Pyrenees, the main mountain ranges are the Cordillera Cantabrica, Cantabrian Range, Sistema Iberico, Iberian System, Sistema Central, Central System, Montes de Toledo, Sierra Morena and the Sistema Betico, Betic System, whose highest peak, the 3,478-meter high, 11,411-foot, Mulhacen, located in Sierra Nevada, is the highest elevation in the Iberian Peninsula. The highest point in Spain is the Teide, a 3,718-meter, 12,198 feet, active volcano in the Canary Islands. The Meseta Central, often translated as in a plateau, is a vast plateau in the heart of Peninsular Spain, split in two by the Sistema Central. There are several major rivers in Spain such as the Tagus, Tajo, Ebro, Guadiana, Douro, Duero, Guadalquivir, Júcar, Segura, Turria and Minho. Alluvial plains are found along the coast, the largest of which is that of the Guadalquivir in Andalusia. Climate. Three main climatic zones can be separated, according to geographical situation and orographic conditions. The Mediterranean climate is characterized by warm/hot and dry summers and is the predominant climate in the country. It has two varieties, XO and CSP according to the Köppen climate classification. The XO zone is associated with areas with hot summers. It is predominant in the southern Mediterranean, except southeastern, and southern Atlantic coast and inland throughout Andalusia, Extremadura and much of the center of the country. Some areas of XO, mainly those inland, such as some areas of Extremadura, Castilla-La Mancha, Madrid and even parts of Andalusia, have cool winters with some continental influences, while the regions with a Mediterranean climate close to the sea have mild winters. The CSB zone has warm rather than hot summers, and extends to additional cool winter areas not typically associated with a Mediterranean climate, such as much of central and northern central of Spain, for example western Castile-Leon, northeastern Castilla-La Mancha and northern Madrid, and into much rainier areas, notably Galicia. The semi-arid climate, BSK, BSH, is predominant in the southeastern quarter of the country, but is also widespread in other areas of Spain. It covers most of the region of Murcia, southern and central eastern Valencia, eastern Andalusia, various areas of Castilla-La Mancha, Madrid and some areas of Extremadura. Further to the north, it is predominant in the upper and mid-reaches of the Ebro Valley, which crosses southern Navarre, central Aragon and western Catalonia. It is also found in a small area in northern Andalusia and in a small area in central Castilla-Leon. Precipitation is limited with dry season extending beyond the summer and average temperature depends on altitude and latitude. The oceanic climate, CFB, is located in the northern quarter of the country, especially in the Atlantic region, Basque Country, Cantabria, Asturias, and partly Galicia and Castile-Leon. It is also found in northern Navarre, in most highlands areas along the Iberian system and in the Pyrenean valleys, where a humid subtropical variant, CFA, also occurs. Winter and summer temperatures are influenced by the ocean, and have no seasonal drought. The CFA zone is associated with areas with hot summers. It is predominant in the southern Mediterranean, except southeastern, and southern Atlantic coast and inland throughout Andalusia, Extremadura and much of the center of the country. Some areas of XA, mainly those inland, such as some areas of Extremadura, Castilla-La Mancha, Madrid and even parts of Andalusia, have cool winters with some continental influences, while the regions with a Mediterranean climate close to the sea have mild winters. The CSB zone has warm rather than hot summers, and extends to additional cool winter areas not typically associated with a Mediterranean climate, such as much of central and northern central of Spain, for example western Castile-Leon, northeastern Castilla-La Mancha and northern Madrid, and into much rainier areas, notably Galicia. Apart from these main types, other subtypes can be found, like the alpine climate in areas with very high altitude, the humid subtropical climate in areas of northeastern Spain and the continental climates, DFC, DFB, DSC, DSB, in the Pyrenees as well as parts of the Cantabrian Range, the Central System, Sierra Nevada and the Iberian System, and a typical desert climate, BWK, BWH, in the zone of Almería, Murcia and eastern Canary Islands. Low-lying areas of the Canary Islands average above 18.0 degrees Celsius, 64.4 degrees Fahrenheit, during their coolest month, thus having influences of tropical climate, although they cannot properly be classified as tropical climates, as according to EMIT, their aridity is high, thus belonging to an arid or semi-arid climate. Climate change. Spain is one of the countries that is most affected by the climate crisis in Europe. Spain could see 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, warming compared to pre-industrial levels in the next 20 years. In the worst-case scenario Spain will reach 4 degrees Celsius, 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit, warming by the end of the century. Due to declining rainfall, Spain's droughts, which are already one of the worst in Europe, will be 10 times worse compared to 2023. The WHO estimated that 4,000 people died in 2022 due to heat-related stress in Spain. 74% of the country is at risk of desertification. Spain's per capita emissions was 4.92 tons in 2021, around 1.5 tons lower than the EU average. Spain was in 2021 responsible for 0.87% of cumulative global emissions. Spain committed to reduce 23% of emissions compared to 1990 levels in 2030 and to be net zero in 2050. Fauna and flora. The fauna presents a wide diversity that is due in large part to the geographical position of the Iberian Peninsula between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean and between Africa and Eurasia, and the great diversity of habitats and biotopes, the result of a considerable variety of climates and well-differentiated regions. The vegetation of Spain is varied due to several factors including the diversity of the terrain, the climate and latitude. Spain includes different phytogeographic regions, each with its own floral characteristics resulting largely from the interaction of climate, topography, soil type and fire, and biotic factors. The country had a 2019 Forest Landscape Integrity Index mean score of 4.23, ranking it 138th globally out of 172 countries. Within the European territory, Spain has the largest number of plant species, 7,600 vascular plants, of all European countries. In Spain there are 17.804 billion trees and an average of 284 million more grow each year. Politics. The constitutional history of Spain dates back to the Constitution of 1812. In June 1976, Spain's new king Juan Carlos dismissed Carlos Arias Navarro and appointed the reformer Adolfo Suárez as prime minister. The resulting general election in 1977 convened the Constituent Cortes, the Spanish parliament, in its capacity as a constitutional assembly, for the purpose of drafting and approving the Constitution of 1978. After a national referendum on 6 December 1978, 88% of voters approved of the new constitution. As a result, Spain successfully transitioned from a one-party personalist dictatorship to a multi-party parliamentary democracy composed of 17 autonomous communities and 2 autonomous cities. These regions enjoy varying degrees of autonomy thanks to the Spanish constitution, which nevertheless explicitly states the indivisible unity of the Spanish nation. Governance. The Crown. The independence of the Crown, its political neutrality and its wish to embrace and reconcile the different ideological standpoints enable it to contribute to the stability of our political system, facilitating a balance with the other constitutional and territorial bodies, promoting the orderly functioning of the state and providing a channel for cohesion among Spaniards. King Felipe VI, 2014. The Spanish Constitution provides for a separation of powers between 5 branches of government, which it refers to as basic state institutions. Foremost amongst these institutions is the Crown, La Corona, the symbol of the Spanish state and its permanence. Spain's parliamentary monarchy is a constitutional one whereby the reigning king or queen is the living embodiment of the crown and thus head of state. Unlike in some other constitutional monarchies however, namely the likes of Belgium, Denmark, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, or indeed the United Kingdom, the monarch is not the fount of national sovereignty or even the nominal chief executive. Rather, the Crown, as an institution, arbitrates and moderates the regular functioning of the legislative, executive, judicial, and compliance branches of the Spanish state. As such, the monarch resolves disputes and crises affecting the disparate branches and prevents the abuse of power. In these respects, the Crown constitutes a fifth moderating branch that does not make public policy or administer public services, functions which rightfully rests with Spain's duly elected legislatures and governments at both the national and regional level. Instead, the Crown personifies the democratic Spanish state, sanctions legitimate authority, ensures the legality of means, and guarantees the execution of the public will. Put another way, the monarch fosters national unity at home, represents Spain abroad, especially with regard to nations of its historical community, and upholds the constitutional processes fundamental for safeguarding representative democracy and providing for the orderly operation and continuity of the Spanish state. This stabilizing role is in keeping with the monarch's solemn oath upon accession to faithfully carry out duties, to obey the constitution and the laws and ensure that they are obeyed, and to respect the rights of citizens and the self-governing communities. A number of constitutional powers, duties, rights, responsibilities, and functions are assigned to the monarch in his or her capacity as head of state. However, the Crown enjoys inviolability in the performance of these prerogatives and cannot be prosecuted in the very courts which administer justice in its name. For this reason, every official act done by the monarch requires the countersignature of the Prime Minister or, when appropriate, the President of the Congress of Deputies to have the force of law. The countersigning procedure or referendo in turn transfers political and legal liability for the royal prerogative to the attesting parties. This provision does not apply to the royal household, over which the monarch enjoys absolute control and supervision, or to membership in the Order of the Golden Fleece, which is a dynastic order in the personal gift of the House of Bourbon-Anjou. The royal prerogatives may be classified by whether they are ministerial acts or reserve powers. Ministerial acts are those royal prerogatives that are, pursuant to the convention established by Juan Carlos I, performed by the monarch after soliciting the advice of the government, the Congress of Deputies, the Senate, the General Council of the Judiciary, or the Constitutional Tribunal, as the case may be. On the other hand, the reserve powers of the Crown are those royal prerogatives that are exercised in the monarch's personal discretion. Most of the Crown's royal prerogatives are ministerial in practice, meaning the monarch has no discretion in their execution and primarily performs them as a matter of state ceremonial. Nevertheless, the monarch enjoys several reserve powers he or she may invoke when necessary to maintain the continuity and stability of state institutions. For example, the monarch has the right to be kept informed on affairs of state through regular audiences with the government. For this purpose, the monarch may preside at any time over meetings of the Council of Ministers, but only when requested by the Prime Minister. In a similar vein, the monarch dissolves the Congress of Deputies, the Senate, or both houses of the Cortes in their entirety before the expiration of their 4-year term and, in consequence thereof, concurrently calls for snap elections. The monarch exercises this prerogative on the request of the Prime Minister, after the matter has been discussed by the Council of Ministers. The monarch may choose to accept or refuse the request. Proclaims national referendums on the proposal of the Prime Minister and with the prior authorization of the Cortes Generales. The monarch may choose to accept or refuse the request. Appoints the 20 members of the General Council of the Judiciary. Of these councillors, 12 are nominated by the Supreme, Appellate and Trial Courts, 4 are nominated by the Congress of Deputies by a majority of 3/5 of its members, and 4 are nominated by the Senate with the same majority. The monarch may choose to accept or refuse a nomination. Appoints the 12 magistrates of the Constitutional Tribunal. Of these magistrates, 4 magistrates are nominated by the Congress of Deputies by a majority of 3/5 of its members, 4 magistrates are nominated by the Senate with the same majority, 2 magistrates are nominated by the government, and 2 magistrates are nominated by the General Council of the Judiciary. The monarch may choose to accept or refuse a nomination. However, it is the monarch's reserve powers concerning government formation that are perhaps the most visible. The monarch nominates a candidate for Prime Minister and, as the case may be, appoints or removes him or her from office based on the Prime Minister's ability to maintain the confidence of the Congress of Deputies. If the Congress of Deputies fails to give its confidence to a new government within 2 months, and is thus incapable of governing as a result of parliamentary gridlock, the monarch may dissolve the Cortes Generales and call for fresh elections. The monarch makes use of these reserve powers in his own deliberative judgment after consulting the President of the Congress of Deputies. Cortes Generales. Legislative authority vests in the Cortes Generales, English, Spanish Parliament, lit. General Courts, a democratically elected bicameral parliament that serves as the supreme representative body of the Spanish people. Aside from the Crown, it is the only basic state institution that enjoys inviolability. It comprises the Congress of Deputies, Congreso de los Diputados, a lower house with 350 deputies, and the Senate, Senado, an upper house with 259 senators. Deputies are elected by popular vote on closed lists via proportional representation to serve 4-year terms. On the other hand, 208 senators are directly elected by popular vote using a limited voting method, with the remaining 51 senators appointed by the regional legislatures to also serve 4-year terms. Government. Executive authority rests with the government, Gobierno de España, which is collectively responsible to the Congress of Deputies. It consists of the Prime Minister, one or more deputy prime ministers, and the various ministers of state. These characters together constitute the Council of Ministers which, as Spain's central executive authority, conducts the business of the government and administers the civil service. The government remains in office so long as it can maintain the confidence of the Congress of Deputies. The Prime Minister, as head of government, enjoys primacy over the other ministers by virtue of his or her ability to advise the monarch as to their appointment and dismissal. Moreover, the Prime Minister has plenary authority conferred by the Spanish Constitution to direct and coordinate the government's policies and administrative actions. The Spanish monarch nominates the Prime Minister after consulting representatives from the different parliamentary groups and in turn formally appoints him or her to office upon a vote of investiture in the Congress of Deputies. Administrative divisions. Autonomous communities. Spain's autonomous communities are the first-level administrative divisions of the country. They were created after the current constitution came into effect, in 1978, in recognition of the right to self-government of the nationalities and regions of Spain. The autonomous communities were to comprise adjacent provinces with common historical, cultural, and economic traits. This territorial organization, based on devolution, is known in Spain as the State of Autonomies, Estado de las Autonomías. The basic institutional law of each autonomous community is the Statute of Autonomy. The Statutes of Autonomy establish the name of the community according to its historical and contemporary identity, the limits of its territories, the name and organization of the institutions of government and the rights they enjoy according to the Constitution. This ongoing process of devolution means that, while officially a unitary state, Spain is nevertheless one of the most decentralized countries in Europe, along with federations like Belgium, Germany, and Switzerland. Catalonia, Galicia and the Basque Country, which identified themselves as nationalities, were granted self-government through a rapid process. Andalusia also identified itself as a nationality in its first Statute of Autonomy, even though it followed the longer process stipulated in the constitution for the rest of the country. Progressively, other communities in revisions to their statutes of autonomy have also taken that denomination in accordance with their historical and modern identities, such as the Valencian Community, the Canary Islands, the Balearic Islands, and Aragon. The autonomous communities have wide legislative and executive autonomy, with their own elected parliaments and governments as well as their own dedicated public administrations. The distribution of powers may be different for every community, as laid out in their statutes of autonomy, since devolution was intended to be asymmetrical. For instance, only two communities, the Basque Country and Navarre, have full fiscal autonomy based on ancient foral provisions. Nevertheless, each autonomous community is responsible for healthcare and education, among other public services. Beyond these competencies, the nationalities, Andalusia, the Basque Country, Catalonia, and Galicia, were also devolved more powers than the rest of the communities, among them the ability of the regional president to dissolve the parliament and call for elections at any time. In addition, the Basque Country, the Canary Islands, Catalonia, and Navarre each have autonomous police corps of their own. At Saint-Tsa, Policia Canaria, Mossos d'Esquadra, and Policia Foral respectively. Other communities have more limited forces or none at all, like the Policia Autónoma Andaluza in Andalusia or Biscam in Madrid. Provinces and municipalities. Autonomous communities are divided into provinces, which served as their territorial building blocks. In turn, provinces are divided into municipalities. The existence of both the provinces and the municipalities is guaranteed and protected by the Constitution, not necessarily by the statutes of autonomy themselves. Municipalities are granted autonomy to manage their internal affairs, and provinces are the territorial divisions designed to carry out the activities of the state. The current provincial division structure is based, with minor changes, on the 1833 territorial division by Javier de Burgos, and in all, the Spanish territory is divided into 50 provinces. The communities of Asturias, Cantabria, La Rioja, the Balearic Islands, Madrid, Murcia and Navarre are the only communities that comprise a single province, which is coextensive with the community itself. In these cases, the administrative institutions of the province are replaced by the governmental institutions of the community. Foreign relations. After the return of democracy following the death of Franco in 1975, Spain's foreign policy priorities were to break out of the diplomatic isolation of the Franco years and expand diplomatic relations, enter the European community, and define security relations with the West. As a member of NATO since 1982, Spain has established itself as a participant in multilateral international security activities. Spain's EU membership represents an important part of its foreign policy. Even on many international issues beyond Western Europe, Spain prefers to coordinate its efforts with its EU partners through the European political cooperation mechanisms. Spain has maintained its special relations with Hispanic America and the Philippines. Its policy emphasizes the concept of an Ibero-American community, essentially the renewal of the concept of Hispanidad or Hispanismo, as it is often referred to in English, which has sought to link the Iberian Peninsula with Hispanic America through language, commerce, history and culture. It is fundamentally based on shared values and the recovery of democracy. The country is involved in a number of territorial disputes. Spain claims Gibraltar, an overseas territory of the United Kingdom, in the southernmost part of the Iberian Peninsula. Another dispute surrounds the Savage Islands. Spain claims that they are rocks rather than islands, and therefore does not accept the Portuguese exclusive economic zone, 200 nautical miles, generated by the islands. Spain claims sovereignty over the Perejil Island, a small, uninhabited rocky islet located in the south shore of the Strait of Gibraltar. It was the subject of an armed incident between Spain and Morocco in 2002. Morocco claims the Spanish cities of Ceuta and Melilla and the Plazas de Soberania islets off the northern coast of Africa. Portugal does not recognize Spain's sovereignty over the territory of Olivenza. Military. The Spanish armed forces are divided into three branches: Army, Ejército de Tierra, Navy, Armada, and Air and Space Force, Ejército del Aire y del Espacio. The armed forces of Spain are known as the Spanish Armed Forces, Fuerzas Armadas Españolas. Their commander-in-chief is the King of Spain, Felipe VI. The next military authorities in line are the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense. The fourth military authority of the state is the Chief of the Defense Staff, GIMAD. The Defense Staff, Estado Mayor de la Defensa, assists the GIMAD as auxiliary body. The Spanish Armed Forces are a professional force with a strength in 2017 of 121,900 active personnel and 4,770 reserve personnel. The country also has the 77,000-strong Civil Guard, which comes under the control of the Ministry of Defense in times of a national emergency. The Spanish defense budget is €5.71 billion, $7.2 billion, a 1% increase for 2015. The increase comes because of security concerns in the country. Military conscription was suppressed in 2001. Human rights. The Spanish Constitution of 1978 protect all Spaniards and all the peoples of Spain in the exercise of human rights, their cultures and traditions, languages and institutions. According to Amnesty International, AI, government investigations of alleged police abuses are often lengthy and punishments were light. Violence against women was a problem, which the government took steps to address. Spain provides one of the highest degrees of liberty in the world for its LGBT community. Among the countries studied by Pew Research Center in 2013, Spain is rated first in acceptance of homosexuality, with 88% of those surveyed saying that homosexuality should be accepted. The Cortes Generales approved the Gender Equality Act in 2007 aimed at furthering equality between genders in Spanish political and economic life. According to Interparliamentary Union data as of 1 September 2018, 137 of the 350 members of the Congress were women, 39.1%, while in the Senate, there were 101 women out of 266, 39.9%, placing Spain 16th on their list of countries ranked by proportion of women in the lower, or single, house. The gender empowerment measure of Spain in the United Nations Human Development Report is 0.794, 12th in the world. Economy. Spain's capitalist mixed economy is the 14th largest worldwide and the 4th largest in the European Union, as well as the Eurozone's 4th largest. The centre-right government of former Prime Minister José María Aznar worked successfully to gain admission to the group of countries launching the euro in 1999. Unemployment stood at 12.3% in April 2024. The youth unemployment rate, 26.5% in April 2024, is extremely high compared to EU standards. Perennial weak points of Spain's economy include a large informal economy, and an education system which OECD reports place among the poorest for developed countries, along with the United States. Since the 1990s, some Spanish companies have gained multinational status, often expanding their activities in culturally close Latin America. Spain is the second biggest foreign investor there, after the United States. Spanish companies have also expanded into Asia, especially China and India. Spanish companies invested in fields like renewable energy commercialization. Iberdrola was the world's largest renewable energy operator. Technology companies like Telefónica, Abengoa, Mondragon Corporation, which is the world's largest worker-owned cooperative, Movistar, Hisdesat, Indra, train manufacturers like CF, Tolgo, global corporations such as the textile company Inditex, petroleum companies like Repsol or Cepsa, and infrastructure, with 6 of the 10 biggest international construction firms specializing in transport being Spanish, like Ferrovial, Acciona, ACS, OHL and FCC. The automotive industry in Spain is one of the largest employers in the country. In 2015 Spain was the 8th largest automobile producer country in the world and still in 2022 the 2nd largest car manufacturer in Europe after Germany. By 2016, the automotive industry was generating 8.7% of Spain's gross domestic product, employing about 9% of the manufacturing industry. By 2008 the automobile industry was the 2nd most exported industry, while in 2015 about 80% of the total production was for export. German companies poured €4.8 billion into Spain in 2015, making the country the 2nd largest destination for German foreign direct investment behind only the US. The lion's share of that investment, €4 billion, went to the country's auto industry. Tourism. In 2017, Spain was the 2nd most visited country in the world, recording 82 million tourists, which marked the 5th consecutive year of record-beating numbers. The headquarters of the World Tourism Organization are located in Madrid. Spain's geographic location, popular coastlines, diverse landscapes, historical legacy, vibrant culture, and excellent infrastructure have made the country's international tourist industry among the largest in the world. In the last 5 decades, international tourism in Spain has grown to become the 2nd largest in the world in terms of spending, worth approximately €40 billion or about 5% of GDP in 2006. Castile and Leon is the Spanish leader in rural tourism linked to its environmental and architectural heritage. Energy. In 2010 Spain became the solar power world leader when it overtook the United States with a massive power station plant called La Florida, near Alvarado, Badajoz. Spain is also Europe's main producer of wind energy. In 2010 its wind turbines generated 16.4% of all electrical energy produced in Spain. On the 9th of November 2010, wind energy reached a historic peak, covering 53% of mainland electricity demand and generating an amount of energy that is equivalent to that of 14 nuclear reactors. Other renewable energies used in Spain are hydroelectric, biomass and marine. Non-renewable energy sources used in Spain are nuclear, 8 operative reactors, gas, coal, and oil. Fossil fuels together generated 58% of Spain's electricity in 2009, just below the OECD mean of 61%. Nuclear power generated another 19%, and wind and hydro about 12% each. Science and technology. The Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas, CSIC, is the leading public agency dedicated to scientific research in the country. It ranked as the 5th top governmental scientific institution worldwide, and 32nd overall, in the 2018 SC Imago Institutions rankings. Spain was ranked 29th in the Global Innovation Index in 2023. Higher education institutions perform about 60% of the basic research in the country. Likewise, the contribution of the private sector to R&D expenditures is much lower than in other EU and OECD countries. Transport. The Spanish road system is mainly centralized, with 6 highways connecting Madrid to the Basque Country, Catalonia, Valencia, West Andalusia, Extremadura, and Galicia. Additionally, there are highways along the Atlantic, Ferrol to Vigo, Cantabrian, Oviedo to San Sebastian, and Mediterranean, Girona to Cadiz, coasts. Spain aims to put 1 million electric cars on the road by 2014 as part of the government's plan to save energy and boost energy efficiency. The former Minister of Industry Miguel Sebastián said that the electric vehicle is the future and the engine of an industrial revolution. Spain has the most extensive high-speed rail network in Europe, and the 2nd most extensive in the world after China. As of 2019, Spain has a total of over 3,400 kilometers, 2,112.66 miles, of high-speed tracks linking Malaga, Seville, Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, and Valladolid, with the trains operated at commercial speeds up to 310 km per hour, 190 miles per hour. On average, the Spanish high-speed train is the fastest one in the world, followed by the Japanese bullet train and the French TGV. Regarding punctuality, it is second in the world, 98.5% on-time arrival, after the Japanese Shinkansen, 99%. Should the aims of the ambitious AF program, Spanish high-speed trains, be met, by 2020 Spain will have 7,000 kilometers, 4,300 miles, of high-speed trains linking almost all provincial cities to Madrid in less than 3 hours and Barcelona within 4 hours. There are 47 public airports in Spain. The busiest one is the airport of Madrid, Badajoz, with 50 million passengers in 2011, being the world's 15th busiest airport, as well as the European Union's 4th busiest. The airport of Barcelona, El Prat, is also important, with 35 million passengers in 2011, being the world's 31st busiest airport. Other main airports are located in Mallorca, Malaga, Las Palmas, Gran Canaria, and Alicante. Demographics. In 2024, Spain had a population of 48,692,804 people as recorded by Spain's Instituto Nacional de Estadística. Spain's population density, at 96/km2, 249.2 per square mile, is lower than that of most Western European countries, and its distribution across the country is very unequal. With the exception of the region surrounding the capital, Madrid, the most populated areas lie around the coast. The population of Spain has risen 2.5 times since 1900, when it stood at 18.6 million, principally due to the spectacular demographic boom in the 1960s and early 1970s. In 2022, the average total fertility rate, TFR, across Spain was 1.16 children born per woman, one of the lowest in the world, below the replacement rate of 2.1. It remains considerably below the high of 5.11 children born per woman in 1865. Spain subsequently has one of the oldest populations in the world, with the average age of 43.1 years. Native Spaniards make up 88% of the total population of Spain. After the birth rate plunged in the 1980s and Spain's population growth rate dropped, the population again trended upward initially upon the return of many Spaniards who had emigrated to other European countries during the 1970s, and more recently, fueled by large numbers of immigrants who make up 12% of the population. The immigrants originate mainly in Latin America, 39%, North Africa, 16%, Eastern Europe, 15%, and Sub-Saharan Africa, 4%. In 2008, Spain granted citizenship to 84,170 persons, mostly to people from Ecuador, Colombia, and Morocco. Spain has a number of descendants of populations from former colonies, especially Latin America and North Africa. Smaller numbers of immigrants from several sub-Saharan countries have recently been settling in Spain. There are also sizable numbers of Asian immigrants, most of whom are of Middle Eastern, South Asian and Chinese origin. The single largest group of immigrants are European, represented by large numbers of Romanians, Britons, Germans, French and others. Urbanization. Immigration. According to the official Spanish statistics, INE, there were 6.6 million foreign residents in Spain in 2024, 13.5%, while all citizens born outside of Spain were 8.9 million in 2024, 18.31% of the total population. According to residence permit data for 2011, more than 860,000 were Romanian, about 770,000 were Moroccan, approximately 390,000 were British, and 360,000 were Ecuadorian. Other sizable foreign communities are Colombian, Bolivian, German, Italian, Bulgarian, and Chinese. There are more than 200,000 migrants from sub-Saharan Africa living in Spain, principally Senegaleses and Nigerians. Since 2000, Spain has experienced high population growth as a result of immigration flows, despite a birth rate that is only half the replacement level. This sudden and ongoing inflow of immigrants, particularly those arriving illegally by sea, has caused noticeable social tension. Within the EU, Spain had the second highest immigration rate in percentage terms after Cyprus, but by a great margin, the highest in absolute numbers, up to 2008. The number of immigrants in Spain had grown up from 500,000 people in 1996 to 5.2 million in 2008 out of a total population of 46 million. In 2005 alone, a regularization program increased the legal immigrant population by 700,000 people. There are a number of reasons for the high level of immigration, including Spain's cultural ties with Latin America, its geographical position, the porosity of its borders, the large size of its underground economy and the strength of the agricultural and construction sectors, which demand more low-cost labor than can be offered by the national workforce. Another statistically significant factor is the large number of residents of EU origin typically retiring to Spain's Mediterranean coast. In fact, Spain was Europe's largest absorber of migrants from 2002 to 2007, with its immigrant population more than doubling as 2.5 million people arrived. In 2008, prior to the onset of the economic crisis, the Financial Times reported that Spain was the most favored destination for Western Europeans considering a move from their own country and seeking jobs elsewhere in the EU. In 2008, the government instituted a plan of voluntary return which encouraged unemployed immigrants from outside the EU to return to their home countries and receive several incentives, including the right to keep their unemployment benefits and transfer whatever they contributed to the Spanish social security. The program had little effect. Although the program failed to, the sharp and prolonged economic crisis from 2010 to 2011, resulted in tens of thousands of immigrants leaving the country due to lack of jobs. In 2011 alone, more than 500,000 people left Spain. For the first time in decades the net migration rate was expected to be negative, and 9 out of 10 immigrants were foreigners. Languages. Spain is a multilingual state. Spanish, featured in the 1978 Spanish Constitution as Castellano, Castilian has effectively been the official language of the entire country since 1931. As allowed in the third article of the Constitution, the other Spanish languages can also become official in their respective autonomous communities. The territoriality created by the form of co-officiality codified in the 1978 Constitution creates an asymmetry, in which Spanish-speakers' rights apply to the entire territory whereas vis-à-vis the rest of co-official languages, their speakers' rights only apply in their territories. Besides Spanish, other territorialized languages include Aragonese, Aranese, Asturianese, Basque, Southern Arabic, Daria, Catalan, Galician, Portuguese, and Tamazight, to which the Romani Carlo and the sign languages may add up. The number of speakers varies widely and their legal recognition is uneven, with some of the most vulnerable languages lacking any sort of effective protection. Those enjoying recognition as official language in some autonomous communities include Catalan, in Catalonia, the Balearic Islands and the Valencian community, where it is referred to as Valencian, Galician, in Galicia, Basque, in the Basque country and part of Navarre, and Aranese in Catalonia. Spanish is natively spoken by 74%, Catalan by 17%, Galician by 7% and Basque by 2% of the Spanish population. Some of the most spoken foreign languages used by the immigrant communities include Moroccan Arabic, Romanian, and English. Education. State education in Spain is free and compulsory from the age of 6 to 16. The current education system is regulated by the 2006 Educational Law, Ley Orgánica de Educación, or Fundamental Law for the Education. In 2014, the law was partially modified by the newer and controversial LOMS Law, Ley Orgánica para la Mejora de la Calidad Educativa, or Fundamental Law for the Improvement of the Education System, commonly called Ley Wirt Law. Since 1970 to 2014, Spain has had 7 different educational laws: LGE, LOS, LOAD, LOGS, LOPEG, LO and LOMS. The levels of education are preschool education, primary education, secondary education and post-16 education. In regards to the professional development education or the vocational education, there are 3 levels besides the university degrees: the Formación Profesional Básica, basic vocational education, the Ciclo Formativo de Grado Medio or CFGM, medium-level vocation education, which can be studied after studying the secondary education, and the Ciclo Formativo de Grado Superior or CFGS, higher-level vocational education, which can be studied after studying the post-16 education level. The Program for International Student Assessment coordinated by the OECD currently ranks the overall knowledge and skills of Spanish 15-year-olds as significantly below the OECD average of 493 in reading literacy, mathematics, and science. Health. The healthcare system of Spain, Spanish national health system, is considered one of the best in the world, in 7th position in the ranking elaborated by the World Health Organization. The healthcare is public, universal and free for any legal citizen of Spain. The total health spending is 9.4% of the GDP, slightly above the average of 9.3% of the OECD. Religion. Religious self-definition in Spain, SIS survey, sample size, 3,935, February 2023. Roman Catholicism, which has a long history in Spain, remains the dominant religion. Although it no longer has official status by law, in all public schools in Spain students have to choose either a religion or ethics class. Catholicism is the religion most commonly taught, although the teaching of Islam, Judaism, and evangelical Christianity is also recognized in law. According to a 2020 study by the Spanish Center for Sociological Research, about 61% of Spaniards self-identify as Catholics, 3% other faiths, and about 35% identify with no religion. Most Spaniards do not participate regularly in religious services. Recent polls and surveys suggest that around 30% of the Spanish population is irreligious. The Spanish constitution enshrines secularism in governance, as well as freedom of religion or belief for all, saying that no religion should have a state character, while allowing for the state to cooperate with religious groups. Protestant churches have about 1,200,000 members. There are about 105,000 Jehovah's Witnesses. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has approximately 46,000 adherents in 133 congregations. A study made by the Union of Islamic Communities of Spain demonstrated that there were more than 2,100,000 inhabitants of Muslim background living in Spain as of 2019, accounting for 4 to 5% of the total population of Spain. The vast majority was composed of immigrants and descendants originating from the Maghreb, especially Morocco, and other African countries. More than 879,000, 42%, of them had Spanish nationality. Judaism was practically non-existent in Spain from the 1492 expulsion until the 19th century, when Jews were again permitted to enter the country. Currently there are around 62,000 Jews in Spain, or 0.14% of the total population. Culture. Spain is a Western country and one of the major Latin countries of Europe, and a cultural superpower. Spanish culture is marked by strong historic ties to the Catholic Church, which played a pivotal role in the country's formation and subsequent identity. Spanish art, architecture, cuisine, and music have been shaped by successive waves of foreign invaders, as well as by the country's Mediterranean climate and geography. The centuries-long colonial era globalized Spanish language and culture, with Spain also absorbing the cultural and commercial products of its diverse empire. World Heritage Sites. Spain has 49 World Heritage Sites. These include the landscape of Monte Perdido in the Pyrenees, which is shared with France, the prehistoric rock-art sites of the Coa Valley and Siga Verde, which is shared with Portugal, the heritage of Mercury, shared with Slovenia, and the ancient and primeval beech forests, shared with other countries of Europe. In addition, Spain has also 14 intangible cultural heritage, or human treasures. Literature. Some early examples of vernacular Romance-based literature include short snippets of Mozarabic Romance, such as refrains, sprinkled in Arabic and Hebrew texts. Other examples of early Iberian Romance include the Glossas Emilianensis written in Latin, Basque, and Romance. Early medieval literature in Christian Iberia was written in Latin, which remained as the standard literary language up until the mid-13th century, whereas Ibero-Romance vernaculars and Basque were spoken. A decisive development ensued in the 13th century in Toledo, where Arabic scholarship was translated to the local vernacular, Castilian. In the scope of lyric poetry, Castilian coexisted alongside Galician Portuguese across the Crown of Castile up until the 16th century. The Romance variety preferred in Eastern Iberia for lyrical poetry, Occitan, became increasingly Catalanized in the 14th and 15th centuries. Major literary works from the Middle Ages include the Cantar Mio Cid, Tirant lo Blanche, the Book of Good Love and Coplos por la Morte de su Padre. Genres such as Mesta de Juglaria and Mesta de Clarisha were cultivated. Promoted by the monarchs in the late Middle Ages and even codified in the late 15th century, Castilian, thought to be widespread known as Spanish from the 16th century on, progressively became the language of the elites in the Iberian Peninsula, which ushered in a golden era of Castilian literature in the 16th and 17th centuries, also in the science domain, eclipsing Galician and Catalan. Famous early modern works include La Celestina and Lothario de Tormes. The famous Don Quixote de la Mancha by Miguel de Cervantes was written in this time. Other writers from the period are Francisco de Quevedo, Lope de Vega, Calderón de la Barca or Tirso de Molina. During the Enlightenment authors included Benito Hieronymo Feijoo, Gaspar Melchor de Jovellanos, and Leandro Fernández de Moratin. Steps of Spanish Romantic literature, initially a rebellion against French classicism, have been traced back to the last quarter of the 18th century, even if the movement had its heyday between 1835 and 1850, waning thereafter. In a broader definition encompassing the period from 1868 or 1874 to 1936, the so-called Silver Age of Spanish culture ensued. The waning of Romantic literature was followed by the development of Spanish realism, which offered depictions of contemporary life and society as they were, rather than romanticized or stylized presentations. The major realist writer was Benito Pérez Galdós. The second half of the 19th century also saw the resurgence of the literary use of local languages other than Spanish under cultural movements inspired by Romanticism such as the Catalan Renaissance or the Galician Rexurdimento. Rarely used before in a written medium, the true fostering of the literary use of the Basque language had to wait until the 1960s, even if some interest towards the language had developed in the late 19th century. 20th century authors were classified in loose literary generations such as the generation of 98, the generation of 27, generation of 36 and the generation of 50. Premio Planeta de Novela and Miguel de Cervantes Prize are the two main awards in Spanish literature. Philosophy. The construct pertaining a distinctive Spanish philosophical thought has been variously approached by academia, either by diachronically tracing its development throughout the centuries from the Roman conquest of Hispania on, with early representatives such as Seneca, Trajan, Lucan, or Martial, by pinpointing its origins to the late 19th century, associated to the generation of 98, or simply by outright denying its existence. The crux around the existence of a Spanish philosophy pitted the likes of Marcelino Menéndez y Pelayo, chief architect of the myth around it, against Antonio Pérez. Foreign imports such as Krausism proved to be extremely influential in Spain in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Art. Artists from Spain have been highly influential in the development of various European and American artistic movements. Due to historical, geographical and generational diversity, Spanish art has known a great number of influences. The Mediterranean heritage with Greco-Roman and some Moorish influences in Spain, especially in Andalusia, is still evident today. European influences include Italy, Germany, and France, especially during the Renaissance, Spanish Baroque and Neoclassical periods. There are many other autochthonous styles such as the pre-Romanesque art and architecture, Hurrian architecture or the Isabelline Gothic. During the Golden Age, painters working in Spain included El Greco, José de Ribera, Bartolomé Esteban Murillo, and Francisco Zurbarán. Also in the Baroque period, Diego Velázquez created some of the most famous Spanish portraits, such as Las Meninas and Las Hilanderas. Francisco Goya painted during a historical period that includes the Spanish Independence War, the fights between liberals and absolutists, and the rise of contemporary nation-states. Joaquín Sorolla is a well-known modern impressionist painter, and there are many important Spanish painters belonging to the modernism art movement, including Pablo Picasso, Salvador Dali, Juan Gris, and Joan Miró. Sculpture. The Plateresque style extended from beginnings of the 16th century until the last third of the century, and its stylistic influence pervaded the works of all great Spanish artists of the time. Alonso Berruguete, Valladolid school, is called the Prince of Spanish sculpture. His main works were the upper stalls of the choir of the Cathedral of Toledo, the tomb of Cardinal Tavera in the same cathedral, and the altarpiece of the Visitation in the Church of Santa Ursula in the same locality. Other notable sculptors were Bartolomé Ordóñez, Diego de Siloé, Juan de Juni and Damián Forment. There were two schools, the Seville school, to which Juan Martínez Montañés belonged, whose most celebrated works are the Crucifix in the Cathedral of Seville, another in Vergara, and a St. John, and the Granada school, to which Alonso Cano belonged, to whom an Immaculate Conception and a Virgin of Rosary are attributed. Other notable Andalusian Baroque sculptors were Pedro de Mena, Pedro Roldán and his daughter Luisa Roldán, Juan de Mesa and Pedro Duque Cornejo. In the 20th century, the most important Spanish sculptors were Julio González, Pablo Gargallo, Eduardo Chillida, and Pablo Serrano. Cinema. After the first projection of a cinematographer in Spain by 1896, cinema developed in the following years, with Barcelona becoming the largest production hub in the country, as well as a major European hub, on the eve of the World War I. The conflict offered the Spanish industry of silent films an opportunity for further growth. Local studios for sound films were created in 1932. The government imposition of dubbing of foreign films in 1941 accustomed Spanish audiences to watching dubbed films. Spanish cinema has achieved major international success, including Oscars for recent films such as Pan's Labyrinth and Volva. Distinct exploitation genres that flourished in the second half of the 20th century include the fantaterra, the cinequinqui and the so-called distape films. As of 2021, the festivals of San Sebastian and Malaga are ranked among the top cultural initiatives in the country. Architecture. Earth and gypsum are very common materials of the traditional vernacular architecture in Spain, particularly in the east of the country, where most of the deposits of gypsum are located. Due to its historical and geographical diversity, Spanish architecture has drawn from a host of influences. Fine examples of Islamicate architecture, belonging to the Western Islamic tradition, were built in the Middle Ages in places such as Córdoba, Seville, or Granada. Similarly to the Maghreb, stucco decoration in Al-Andalus became an architectural style mark in the High Middle Ages. Simultaneously, the Christian kingdoms also developed their own styles, developing a pre-Romanesque style when for a while isolated from contemporary mainstream European architectural influences during the earlier Middle Ages. They later integrated the Romanesque and Gothic streams. There was then an extraordinary flourishing of the Gothic style that resulted in numerous instances being built throughout the entire territory. The so-called Mudéjar style came to designate works by Muslims, Christians and Jews in lands conquered from Muslims. The arrival of modernism produced much of the architecture of the 20th century. An influential style centered in Barcelona, known as Modernism, produced a number of important architects, of which Gaudí is one. The international style was led by groups like Gatepack. Spain is currently experiencing a revolution in contemporary architecture, and Spanish architects like Rafael Monillo, Santiago Calatrava, Ricardo Bofill as well as many others have gained worldwide renown. Music and dance. Spanish music is often considered abroad to be synonymous with flamenco, a West Andalusian musical genre, which, contrary to popular belief, is not widespread outside that region. Various regional styles of folk music abound. Pop, rock, hip-hop and heavy metal are also popular. In the field of classical music, Spain has produced a number of noted composers such as Isaac Albéniz, Manuel de Falla and Enrique Granados, and singers and performers such as Plácido Domingo, José Carreras, Montserrat Caballé, Alicia de la Rocha, Alfredo Kraus, Pablo Casals, Ricardo Vines, José Iturbi, Pablo de Sarasate, Jordi Savall, and Teresa Berganza. In Spain there are over 40 professional orchestras, including the Orquestra Sinfónica de Barcelona, Orquesta Nacional de España and the Orquesta Sinfónica de Madrid. Major opera houses include the Teatro Real, the Gran Teatre del Liceo, Teatro Arriaga and the El Palau de les Arts Reina Sofia. Thousands of music fans also travel to Spain each year for internationally recognized summer music festival Sonar, which features pop and techno acts, and Benicassim, which tends to feature alternative rock and dance acts. The Vitoria-Gasteiz Jazz Festival is one of the main ones in its genre. The most popular traditional musical instrument, the guitar, originated in Spain. Typical of the north are the traditional bagpipers or gaiteros, mainly in Asturias and Galicia. Cuisine. Spanish cuisine consists of a great variety of dishes which stem from differences in geography, culture and climate. It is heavily influenced by seafood available from the waters that surround the country, and reflects the country's deep Mediterranean roots. Spain's extensive history with many cultural influences has led to a unique cuisine. In particular, three main divisions are easily identified: Mediterranean Spain, coastal regions, from Catalonia to Andalusia, heavy use of seafood, such as pescuezo frito, fried fish, cold soups like gazpacho, and many rice-based dishes like paella from Valencia and arroz negro, black rice, from Catalonia. In Spain, Castiles, hot, thick soups such as the bread and garlic-based Castilian soup, along with substantial stews such as cocido madrileño. Food is traditionally preserved by salting, such as Spanish ham, or immersed in olive oil, such as manchego cheese. Atlantic Spain, the northern coast, including Asturian, Basque, Cantabrian and Galician cuisine, vegetable and fish-based stews like caldo gallego and marmitaco. Also, the lightly cured Lacan ham. The best-known cuisine of the northern countries often rely on ocean seafood, as in the Basque-style cod, albacore or anchovy, or the Galician octopus-based polvo a feira and shellfish dishes. Sport. While varieties of football have been played in Spain as far back as Roman times, sport in Spain has been dominated by football since the early 20th century. Real Madrid CF and FC Barcelona are two of the most successful football clubs in the world. The country's national men's football team won the UEFA European Championship in 1964, 2008, and 2012 and the FIFA World Cup in 2010, and is the first team ever to win 3 back-to-back major international tournaments. Spain's women's national team were champions of the 2023 FIFA World Cup, becoming one of only 5 nations to win a Women's World Cup. Barcelona Femení has won a record 20 domestic trophies. Basketball, tennis, cycling, handball, futsal, motorcycling and, lately, Formula One also can boast of Spanish champions. Today, Spain is a major world sports powerhouse, especially since the 1992 Summer Olympics and Paralympics that were hosted in Barcelona, which stimulated a great deal of interest in sports in the country. The tourism industry has led to an improvement in sports infrastructure, especially for water sports, golf and skiing. In their respective regions, the traditional games of Basque Piloto and Valencian Piloto both are popular. Public holidays and festivals. Public holidays celebrated in Spain include a mix of religious, Roman Catholic, national and local observances. Each municipality is allowed to declare a maximum of 14 public holidays per year, up to 9 of these are chosen by the national government and at least 2 are chosen locally. Spain's National Day, Fiesta Nacional de España, is celebrated on the 12th of October. There are many festivals and festivities in Spain. One of the most famous is San Fermín, in Pamplona. While its most famous event is the Encero, or the running of the bulls. It has become one of the most internationally renowned fiestas in Spain, with over 1 million people attending every year. Other festivals include La Tomatina Tomato Festival in Buñol, Valencia, the carnivals in the Canary Islands, the Falls in Valencia, or the Holy Week in Andalusia and Castile and Leon.